Hello, and welcome back to Joe on Joe, the only podcast where I, Joe Slupski, watch every episode of G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero, in sequential order and comment on it mystery science style. This week, I'm really excited about this episode, guys. I'm really excited because we are reaching literally around the world. We have sent up a signal to our Cobra satellites up in the sky. We've bounced it off the mass device. We've avoided the Pyramid of Darkness, and we have reached all the way to Cape Town, South Africa, to invite to the show my new friend, Steve from JIJOBURG. Steve Jubber, welcome to Joe on Joe.
Thanks, Joe. Guys, I'm doing backflips. This is very exciting. You wouldn't say that I have a podcast of my own because, just getting to meet you and coming onto your show, it's dream come true, man.
We are going to say you have a podcast of your own. You're a fellow podcaster. You got GIJOBURG, and you guys have been doing the G.I. Joe podcast game for longer than I have. Tell me a little bit about that show. I know when I first started Joe on Joe, yours was the one that always came up in my searches when I was trying to figure out what the identity of my show was going to be. And I got to be honest, I remember looking at it going, South Africa, like who's doing a G.I. and I was like, is this legit? Like, who's doing a G.I. Joe podcast from South Africa? So I love it. You're real. You're legit. You're here. Tell me about GIJOBURG, man.
Well, it speaks to the quality of the G.I. Joe toy line, man. It had its tentacles in every part of the world, and it was the coolest action figure for anybody's buck. I think G.I. Joe toys cost a measly 7 South African rand back in the day, and you can't even buy a loaf of bread for that anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, inflation. So they were the coolest, most affordable, most widely distributed toys, and they just captured my imagination. You know, other kids got into sports or video games. I enjoyed role play with my action figures, and it was a very community-building thing before that was a thing. Like, all the kids in the neighborhood would come over to my place because I had amassed quite a nice G.I. Joe collection, and we'd just have insane adventures.
That's
memories that
so
have
cool.
lasted to this day.
That's so cool.
Thanks,
so what years were this? Because you always hear about like cultural things, more so not necessarily these days with the internet and everything kind of going global immediately, but back in the day, it'd be like the mid '80s, and you would hear, they just got All in the Family over in England, and you're like, what? Like, and it's like 1992, and they're like, episode 1 of the Cosby Show's just premiering, So when did G.I. Joe hit your shore?
Oh, wow. Okay, well, I think we got the Action Force releases for a large chunk of time, and this is before I was old enough to be cognizant of any of this. I mean, I'm a latter day G.I. Joe fan, so the 90s really hit with me, which is why I'm so stoked that we're doing the Deke series. I'm going to be somewhat of an authority on the latter releases.
I love it.
Yeah. So those were my playground of G.I. Joe characters, vehicles, concepts. I mean, I still have nothing bad to say about the Ninja Force. Don't hate. So it's interesting that G.I. Joe cuts this wide spectrum of fans. I mean, the toys, even in the latter years of the original run, were still the best things hanging off pegs and have had, a lasting effect on me. And imagine my joy, my ecstatic joy when I found the internet and eBay and discovered everything released 1982 to sort of 1987. This was stuff that I didn't know existed. I thought the Tomahawk was something that only existed in the pages of the Marvel comic.
Awesome. And you guys got the comic book over there too. Did you get it as Action Force or did you get it as G.I. Joe?
It was a weird combination of both and kind of a bit of a treasure hunt to find them, find dog-eared copies at newsagents and stuff like that. I mean, the whole comic book store culture hadn't really taken off here at all. So you were going to newsagents and seeing, or even corner cafes, and just seeing if they had back issues of G.I. Joe, just trawling through the spinner rack, or not even the spinner rack. It was like sandwiched in between newspapers. So I had a few scrappy copies of the comic book, just enough to give me a snapshot of what the characters were like. But I mean, G.I. Joe was a play pattern just off the card itself.
Yeah.
You had the figure, the accessories, the exceptionally well and in-depth written file card.
Mm-hmm.
So, there was enough of a jump-off point for your imagination.
Yeah,
you knew that Storm Shadow was bad ninja. You knew Snake Eyes was good ninja. Didn't speak, had a wolf.
Totally agree.
Fight.
Totally agree. It was a few episodes back that one of our guests pointed out that there's so many multiple continuities for it, because if you just had the toys, there was enough info on that file card to build this world in your head of all these characters.
How I know. It was Carl Stern, wasn't it?
Especially, it was Carl. Yeah, especially because they would, I loved in the quote, when the quote would be from another Joe member. It wasn't just an anonymous quote. They'd be like, "Rock and Roll says General Hawk's the best," and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, wow. Like it gives personality to characters outside of just the guy you're dealing with. And then you had the cartoon, and then you had, the comic book. Like, so there was just levels and levels and levels of continuity. So tell me about GIJOBURG. When did you guys start it? Like, what was, I mean, the impetus being you love G.I. Joe, but tell me about the origins of GIJOBURG, the podcast.
Well, I think like most fan project stories, it starts in a comic book store where two total strangers just sort of are going through the racks and saying to each other, and I wish they'd have more G.I. Joe books. Oh, you like G.I. Joe as well? Oh, well, I think we spoke for about an hour and a half about G.I. Joe. It became evident to me that this man had a depth of knowledge that rivaled my own.
And
that man's name was Paul Loebscher.
Paul Loebscher?
Yes, he's the other sort of co-host on the show. He is actually based in Johannesburg, hence the name GIJOBURG.
Okay, there you go.
Punny.
I never put that together. I love it. That's great.
Yeah, well, Joburg is the sort of the colloquial term for Johannesburg, South Africa.
That's fantastic.
So, hey, you heard it first on Joe and Joe podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys met in a comic shop, and you're like, let's do a pod together and let's talk G.I. Joe. And what's your favorite topic to get into on the show? Like, tell me your format of your show.
I think the origins were fireside chats and because it was something that would always get a kick out of the listenership, top 5 lists kind of dominate. Mm-hmm. And try and make them as off the wall and interesting as possible, because everyone has opinions on this beloved toy line. So everyone has a top 5 pistol accessory or backpack, or top 5 issues of the comic book, for instance. That's right up your alley, Joe.
Oh yeah, that's I love the comic. You know this. So
off the top of your head, what are your top 5? Ooh,
top 5. Top 5 of what? Okay, put me on the spot. Top 5
the comic book.
Of the comic book. Well, you gotta include what is it? 26 and 27. The Snake Eyes 2-parter.
Okay.
I'm a Snake Eyes nut. I love the Invasion of Cobra Island. Was that issue 50? I think
it was in that. Oh, I think 50 was more the Invasion of Springfield.
Was that Springfield?
Cobra Island came.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Then, yeah, the Invasion of Springfield. I was a big fan of the Cobra Civil War. The issue numbers are escaping me, but it ran bi-weekly during a summertime here, and I was getting it in the mail at that point. And like every 2 weeks, I would get this great Cobra Civil War war game. Was amazing. A personal soft spot is the issue numbers escaping me, but it's in the 60s, where it's Snake Eyes and Scarlet on the cover, and they're standing over a minefield, and it's the one where Snake Eyes gets blown up, but you think he dies, but he really goes undercover to go rescue the guys that were held over captive overseas. That was an issue that I had taken with me on a like a getaway week that I had with my father up in Upper Wisconsin. So like that's one of those. It is a fun issue, but it's one of those personal memories of, like a personal connection to it. Because that week I read that comic book probably 150 times. Because it was.
It's true to say that this hobby of ours is a mini time machine.
Yeah.
Our enjoyment of it is always enhanced by the nostalgia that we attach to when we first read that issue, or when we first pulled that action figure off the pegs and just marveled at like the art, file card, the little plastic man rattling around in that bubble.
Yeah, it really is. There's 2 levels. There's 2 levels of collecting for me, and so much of it is that for me, the majority of my collecting is that personal connection. Recently I've gotten my hands on some of the early Joes that I never had as a kid. And as cool as it is for me, I'm still like, there's still not that personal connection just because I didn't have them. Even though I read about them, let's say Torpedo, I read about him, of course, and I was a fan. I liked him, but I never had his figures. So I got my hands on one recently, and I think it's really cool. But there isn't that remembrance, that member berry, as they like to say in South Park. Yeah. So and that for me, that carries over into comics, toys, all this stuff. And it makes it very personal. I think that's what's important. When I see people talking about comic books, when I see people come into the shop and they're more mercenary, and they're like, they're just looking to buy a book, that's going to be explosively hot, or they're investment. They're just there for the dollar. And, I'll be talking to them and I'll start dropping basic comic book knowledge. Like, oh yeah, well, this character, blah, blah, blah. And they've just told me of the thousands of dollars they've spent in investing in comics, but they don't know this main character, for example. My head explodes. I'm like, what? Why are you? This is the whole joy. Yes, you can make money with it, but the whole point of this is to know and learn. For me, it is. It's to know and learn and expand my knowledge and stuff on it. So yeah, that's not a world I come from.
Oh, it's frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah.
People who are ignorant about the stuff that we hold so dear.
I'm
going to quote you back to you, but like when you were talking to sort of non-comic book people about how the movies and comic books, I'm talking about comic book properties, how they differ, and how this Infinity War thing, it's not going to play out exactly like the comic book event, and Spider-Man, this stuff. It can get pretty trying sometimes. Yeah. Working with kids.
now as an adult, you seem like a very capable, functioning adult. Have you taken your adult resources and like gone back and bought all the stuff you wanted as a kid?
It's still pretty prohibitive. Being in South Africa, it would incur like serious postage costs. Essentially, sure. You're buying things twice or three times.
Oh, right.
Particularly depending on larger items. Like, for instance, in this episode that we're gonna discuss just now, there is a toy featured quite prominently in it that I would love to have.
The General?
If not for my own... The General, yes.
Yes!
If not for my own purposes of just having a cool, massive toy, I think YouTube is still in dire need of like a really good in-depth review of that thing.
It's a cool toy. It was past my time, so I don't have that connection to it. But when I look up the stuff and I look info, that seems like it's a really cool toy with like a lot of play points on it.
Yeah,
and
I'm thrilled about doing this episode.
They feature it like a commercial. You're so right. They feature it's like, hey everybody, here's the General, go buy it. Like,
I don't see the harm in that. Personally, These are my favorite kinds of episodes. And I don't know if you're familiar with Dan Larson, who does the Toy Galaxy YouTube channel. He does an excellent, very, very wide-ranging show, typically about vintage toys, but he talks about cartoons and the like. But he made reference to the parents groups that would lobby against cartoons that were basically 23 minutes toy commercials, saying like, this is awful. We're being prompted to buy these expensive toys for our kids. Meanwhile, Dan makes the point that not only did he enjoy them as toy commercials, but he enjoyed them because they were advertising things that he could actually buy.
Yeah.
I love when a cartoon showcases what a toy can do, its features, its design, just putting it in fantastical situations.
Yes. And if you think about it, so you got a cartoon, you only get, 30 episodes a year, right? Or whatever the season is. So they're showing, if they showcase it in 20 of those episodes, that's extending the playtime of that toy for that kid. That's making him want to play with that singular toy more and more and more and more, versus how many, I don't know if you have any kids. I have a couple of nieces. They're great. But I've seen it with my friends' kids where they give them a toy, the kid plays with it for a month and then they never play with it again. Right. G.I. Joe and cartoons like this Transformers, absolutely. They extended the life of that. All of a sudden, that toy was being used as long as it was on the show. That would keep the kids' interest. You know what I'm saying? So it's a weird. Yes, it would make them want to spend money to buy it, but it really should have also stretched your dollar out because you were getting longer, like a year or 2 years worth of play out of it.
That is a great point.
Yeah.
I hadn't actually considered that.
Yeah.
And 30 years later, it's extending the play value of the toy to
Totally
men, children everywhere.
Men,
I want me a general as a result.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So ladies and gentlemen, today we are watching the episode General Confusion, which is, I actually like it quite a bit. I think it's a very fun episode. It's the DICs. I am warming to DIC. I really am. I'm still going to knock it a little bit. I still think, the actual quality of the animation is subpar, and there's occasionally some silly stuff that slips by, but I'm warming to the DIC stuff. I can't lie. I can't hide behind this facade of Sunbow only. The DIC stuff is got some sweet spots for me. As long as we were talking about, I know this was the segue I wanted to make though earlier. So we're talking about getting you some toys out in Cape Town, right? And you were saying how they're 3 times the amount of money. Well, this is what I want to talk about. Right now, with JoeCon coming up. When is JoeCon? June?
The weekend of the 21st to the 24th of June.
June.
In Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Chattanooga. So with JoeCon coming up, we are trying to get you guys, the guys from GIJOBURG, to JoeCon. So you've got a GoFundMe going at GoFundMe/GIJOBURG/JoeCon2814/2018/1895 or something like that. Tell me about the GoFundMe. You guys, I love it. And I love it. I think there's enough resources out there. We'd love to get some South Africans over to GIJOBURG in Chattanooga. So give us the URL for the GoFundMe.
Okay. It was www.gofundme.com/GIJOBURG. That's GIJOBURG JoeCon 2018. That's 2018.
Yes, it's much simpler than I made it out to be.
Show notes or something.
Nah, it's much simpler than I made it out to be. It's not that hard. Just do a search for it. Of course, you guys can find GIJOBURG on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. You guys are on Instagram. Typically, it's at GIJOBURG. Very easy to find. You could find me at Joe on Joe Pod. That's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I just started a Patreon for this show. It's to help kind of keep the lights on. We're doing Joe and Joe Illustrated. It's our patron exclusive podcast where we break down every issue of the G.I. Joe comic book in painstaking detail. And you guys can find that at Patreon/Joe and Joe Pod. For only $3 a month, you get access to all this in-depth comic book stuff. We're doing about 4 or 5 of those pods a month. It's a real bargain if you're a fan of the comic book. So with the GoFundMe, how much are you guys trying to raise? Because I can't imagine it's a cheap trip.
Yeah, look, and you must also bear in mind there are 3 of us.
Well, the smallest one can go in a big
$3,500 range
per person or total.
No, total.
Total. Okay. Well, still,
get a deal.
That's pretty hefty.
Mm. Then there are, the internal flights and accommodation. So all told, 7,000.
Oh, yeah. That's good. Well,
big ask, but we're at 65% of that goal.
That's
with 2 months to remain.
Amazing. That's great.
So our look, it's a testimony to the people out there that dig what we do.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. I never expected it. I did it as a kind of what's the worst that could happen kind of venture, and people have responded so warmly. It's quite overwhelming, actually. I never thought that we'd make money out of this thing. It was always just a labor of love, and going to JoeCon is also a labor of love. I'd hate to really ask money for what we do, because that would put me under the pressure of maybe producing a more quality product. I like the bare bones nature of what we do. It is very fireside chat and very informal, and also our release schedule is all over the place. You, however, have kept up an impressive release schedule. Well done.
Thank you. That's a little bit of my OCD in me. Well, I hope we can get you guys there. I don't think I'm going to be able to make Joe at JoeCon this year, actually, because I've got a personal trip scheduled So I think a trip out to JoeCon might be out of the question, but you never know. You never know what'll happen.
Joe,
maybe the tax money shows up, or like, maybe just like my wife's just like, take it off, just go, get out of here. I don't know. So we'll see.
Oh, by the way, excellent play on and play off music.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's got such a great sense of occasion.
Yeah.
I'm like, who's Joe Slepsky? I should know this guy. His name is in the title of his song. It's cool, man.
Oh man,
Very cool.
Yeah, thank you. They're great. Yes, that's Jay Flex and the Heart Attacks. That's Matt's band from DC. He's not in DC anymore, so I don't know if they're. I know that I'm sure they're still friends. I'm sure they would still play together. But Matt moved back to Chicago, so. But I love it. Mm-hmm. I do. I love my theme song.
He's a Crimson Guardsman, and he's chosen to lie low.
He totally is.
Move away from the capital.
Oh yeah. And if he hears this, he'll know what you're talking about. So I love it. Well, listen, we're gonna watch General Confusion today. Are you ready? Oh yeah. All right, my friend. So everyone, make sure you guys find G.I. Joburg. I'm sure you already know it. They were here first. They were planting the flag first. But if you haven't listened to G.I. Joburg, they're, it's all the podcast places everywhere you can find them. Find them they're also great fun on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and all that stuff. So find them. They're great. Steve Jubber. Let's do this thing. You ready?
Oh yes.
Here we go. So this was this the first version of the theme song and stuff that you saw when you were coming up with G.I. Joe?
No, I was treated to the movie theme song, which kicks so much ass.
Which is so much better. Agree. Oh my god, so much better. Like, in fact, didn't you have? So you had me. You sent a correspondent out to WonderCon and grabbed me for a quick interview recently.
Yes.
He was awesome. Was Cujo? Was that his name?
Yep, Cujo, Curtis Herod. He is part of G.I. Joburg. He is our Long Beach member. It makes a lot of sense to have a member of G.I. Joburg. Yeah, he's out on
America.
The ground.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Well, very cool. But he tracked me down, which I was very appreciative of. And we did a quick little interview for you. And so I listened to that episode of your pod, and there was a whole bunch of guys that you tracked down at WonderCon. One of them was the guy who originally animated. So we got General Confusion. It's written by Stephen Green. And it was the guy who animated the opening intro for the movie. And I just thought that was good. That guy's a hero. You put that on your resume, that should get you any job you ever want. I don't care if it's not even an animation. But like, we're hiring psychologists for this medical office. But like, yeah, well, I did the G.I. Joe intro. Okay, you're hired.
Oh, yeah. Well, he was so thrilled to have what essentially was tantamount to a feature film budget. Mm-hmm. He'd been working on cartoon series budgets, and, a lot of his stuff, as he said in the interview, was kind of left on the cutting room floor, as it were. But the animators animated everything that he drew for that opening sequence. So you had background action going, foreground action, like everything was in the mix. And that's why that, endures as a masterclass in cell animation.
It's so good looking. Was it disappointing when you then went to either one of the cartoons? Because I mean, it's a downgrade, and either Sunvo or DSE. It's definitely a downgrade when you're like, oh, that's what the animation looks like.
Well, I think I encountered it so recently that I took it with a big pinch of salt. I didn't grow up with the cartoon in abundance. Mm-hmm. I think we had a few scratchy copies that were traded around school, but it did not air daily in the same way it would have in the States.
Before we get too far into it, let's talk about what's going on in the show. We're getting a very nice array of Joe members on this episode. Like, there's a nice variety. We get Dusty, the new look Dusty, with Sandstorm, his pet coyote. It was a coyote, right? Coyote, not a dog.
Yeah,
right?
Coyote. A tame coyote.
Yeah.
Wow. Well done, Dusty.
Absolutely. We also get the return of Lowlight, which I don't think we have seen him since the Operation Dragonfire.
This is version 2 debut.
Yeah.
Is
this because I thought it was in Dragonfire he was in his Slaughter Marauder outfit.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And
So this would
is his
technically be, I
version.
suppose, version 3.
Yeah. So this is his like just different look, which now he's using just for men on his beard because he was a blonde in the Sunbow series, if memory serves.
Well, it would make sense to take that hair down a shade.
It
because,
does if
he is working off the dock.
You're totally right. It makes total sense. I love Dusty's new look.
You do?
I do. I prefer the original, but I like just seeing Dusty in action.
Though it's kind of got a more superhuman aesthetic. Like, they nailed Desert Trooper in his first version.
Yes.
How do you top that?
You don't.
Well, you rip off his sleeves and give him an animal companion. Very 90s. Like,
it's true.
Yes,
it's true. It's true. I mean, I do prefer the other Dusty, but it's still. I think it's a good look, and I like. I'm on record. I love the animal companions. I love Polly and Timber and Freedom, so I gotta like Sandstorm. So the Joes, they're attacking this Cobra base. They're also getting Penny Pinch with Big Ben, which is great to see Big Ben. And we also, Red Star shows up, but they're still calling him like Colonel Valikov or whatever. And that's a generation 2 of the Crimson Guardsmen, correct?
Yeah, they kind of upgraded the Crimson Guardsmen to being called Crimson Guardsmen Immortal.
Yes.
Presumably that means that these are even more elite.
Yeah. You thought you were good before, but now you're immortal. Because Extreme was taken.
Yes. But this rip is gonna cost Uncle Sam
So this
at
is great.
least
She's just
$15
penny
per
pinching
pair.
everything. The rip in his shirt, all the bullets they're using.
It seems like a plot device we've seen before in G.I. Joe cartoons and comic books.
It
is.
is.
The bureaucrats need a weigh in on
Yes.
how G.I. Joeburg is spending. G.I. Joe, sorry, Freudian slip there. G.I. Joe is spending its money.
Yeah, it is. And I'm trying to remember exactly the episode, but it's not coming to me. However, the previous one that we did for Joe and Joe was a rehash of an old one. It was a rehash of the Synthoid conspiracy, where Cobra replaced someone at the hierarchical, at the top. In this case, they replaced the president, and she then went about dismantling the G.I. Joe team. And that's what they did on the Synthoid conspiracy. So you're right. This does sound familiar, but what's going to happen is by the time we edit this, I'm going to remember exactly what it is. So maybe I'll jump in with an edit, be like, "Hey kids, of course. Yeah, it's this episode." Had I done research, we wouldn't be in this predicament there. Steve.
Research, man. We're here to talk about toys. Yeah. Speaking of which, we are seeing a showcase of awesome toys.
Yes, we are.
Like within the first few minutes of this, we've seen Locusts, Retaliators, the General itself. On the Cobra side, we've seen Destro's Dominator. We've seen a whole bunch of troops. Mm-hmm. Oh, man. Rage tanks.
We also see exploding tree sap.
Every cartoon has to have its MacGuffin, or several of them.
How? What is exploding tree sap all about? I don't understand it. I'll just accept it.
Yeah, it seems to have undone Cobra not once but twice already. Clearly, they don't know how to handle this stuff.
Yeah. Well, you know what? In the universe where over in the Sunbow ones, they made giant fruits and vegetables and attack the city of Chicago with it. I suppose exploding tree bark isn't that far. Maybe there was a source of energon that was infecting the trees.
Oh yeah, because energon gets unstable, doesn't it?
Yeah. So you know what? Here you go. Another Joe Transformer crossover point.
Hasbro Toy Fest.
Yeah.
We just had a cool frame of the General displaying a feature that I don't think people talk about nearly enough.
Which
it
is?
can carry helicopters on its top deck.
Mm-hmm.
There's 2 landing pads, and it came with an included helicopter, I suppose akin to the Terradrome coming with a Firebat, except in the case of the General, it's a mobile base.
Yeah.
And I want to point out that one of my favorite sequences in any toy-related cartoon is when you get to see the insides of the toy.
Yes.
So the Joes in this frame, they're inside the General. They're inside the sort of the computer sort of nerve center inside the toy, and that just gives a toy so much more life. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, I totally agree. I absolutely agree.
Because if you were considering buying the toy, you'd only ever see the catalog shots and maybe the box arts. You'd never really be able to investigate its sort of nooks and crannies like you would if you owned the thing.
Right.
So the cartoon is getting in there for us.
It's
that's something that I always like.
It's the Millennium Falcon effect. Do you remember the Millennium Falcon toy? Yeah, it was the Falcon, but you could pop the top off and you could have adventures inside of the Falcon. If you remember that. And that was just such a big deal for me. Oh, it's Zorana. Zorana's the penny pincher.
Oh,
shocker. But yeah, that being able to go inside that ship and then have full adventures 100% inside the ship was huge. That was a huge thing. Yeah. So you're totally right. Seeing inside this stuff is absolutely
a vehicle, a playset, and a diorama all in one.
Yeah.
Bam. What do you think of the armored Cobra Commander look?
I like him. We're going to go to commercial. Be right back. Today's file card features on the G.I. Joe Tomahawk pilot, codenamed Lift Ticket. His file name is Victor W. Sikorsky, with his primary military specialty being rotary wing aircraft pilot, his secondary military specialty being fixed wing aircraft pilot. His birthplace is Lawton, Oklahoma. Lift Ticket was one of those guys who joined the Army to get out of his hometown. The big difference with Lift Ticket is that he scored so high on the aptitude test that he qualified for West Point Prep OCS Officer Candidate School and Flight Warrant Officer School. Nobody in Lawton ever suspected he was that smart. Apparently neither did Lift Ticket, since he opted for Flight Warrant School over the others, thinking that it was the only one that offered training applicable to civilian employment. Quote, getting into a target area is comparatively easy. You wait until dark and get sneaky. Now getting out, after some caps have been popped and a can of firefight's been opened, well, that's another story. All you can do is squat on the LZ and hope that whoever's driving the extraction chopper is skillful, persistent, lucky, and bulletproof. Lift Ticket satisfies the first 3 requirements, and he's working on the 4th. I was a big fan of Lift Ticket. I liked his look quite a bit. I don't think I ever knew his name. Seeing that it's named Sikorsky, which is after the Sikorsky helicopter, I think that's fantastic. I think his look is dynamite. I love the multicolors they use on him. He's red, green, tan, and black. The coolest thing, he's got a microphone that popped into his head. I know that microphone is very sought after on the collector market because it was easily lost. And of course, we just need to talk about how cool the freaking Tomahawk was. Tomahawk was like a flying base. That's how massive and awesome the Tomahawk was. Everything about the Tomahawk was cool. You had the back ramp door that opened up. You could drive a motorcycle in. You had the removable seats. You had the 2 massive rotor sets. The front canopy popped open. The engine cover popped off so you could work on it. Had all kinds of missiles. It had the guns on the side doors which were open. Tomahawk was so good, and I think Lift Ticket was absolutely one of the better pilots of all time. As far as his design goes, I think he's wonderful. So I'm so down with Lift Ticket. I think he's great. So Victor W. Sikorsky, we salute you. You know, coming up, I had the Armored Cobra Commander, and I wasn't necessarily a fan as a toy, but he's grown on me over the years. It's a little intricate for me, but it's still cool. I think he should have had a rocket pack, though. I don't know why you built a suit of armor without a rocket pack. That seems like a huge
What do you
oversight.
think the holes in the bottom of his boots are for?
Oh, yeah.
Totally Iron Man style.
Yeah,
boots.
It's totally Iron Man style. So this is great. We have our first, these guys are the Desert Scorpion Troopers?
Correct.
Yeah.
And they too seem to have superpowers.
Well, they're
all desert related.
They're positing themselves as being holograms, but they're dudes. It's a funny way to introduce them. They're an actual part of the Cobra Brigade, but they just slap a little computer console on their chest, and they're like, "No, we're holograms. Don't worry about us."
Okay, so I am overwhelmingly positive about this episode, but the one detractor that I have to point out is Big Ben's extremely cliched British accent.
Wow.
I mean, he's definitely speaking Kings all the way. Tally-ho, pip, pip, and all that.
Sure, yeah.
Which,
he's also
the kids, it wouldn't matter so much, but I find it, slightly insulting to my intelligence right now. I'm like,
he's also he's a ladies' man, so they're playing up the James Bond thing. You know, so
well, they're also playing up the fact that Zorana is just the honeypot, man, of this series.
She totally is. And what happened to Mainframe?
Mainframe.
What happened to
at the
her
top-
romance with Mainframe?
What happened to a romance with Destro?
Well, he threw
Operation
her aside.
Dragonfly?
He threw her aside for Barons.
Okay.
So, you know, but like as far as like having Joe Cobra romance, I didn't realize you could have a romance with multiple members of the opposite team. I thought it was like Batman only was in love with Catwoman, not Catwoman and Poison Ivy, you know, and, you know, whoever. It was like there's one member of the opposite team that you can have a romance with. Apparently, Zorana does not follow those rules. Zorana is not only Mainframe's side girl, but now Big Ben, she's a big fan of.
Well, Mainframe didn't get a figure update.
No,
Too
he
bad.
didn't.
Fighting real Cobra troops now, do we?
I like that Heavy Duty is just flying in the outside of this helicopter.
No hands.
Inside a cavern. I can't think of anything more dangerous than what was just happening. Like,
there's no stronger bond than the G.I. Joe foot pig.
it's true. Well, that's very true, but a helicopter in a cave is dangerous enough. And now we've got
it's a Locust minicopter, man. Those things are good at getting into tight spaces.
Oh, he doesn't have any missiles.
Try telling that to the Dominators.
Yeah, this whole Joe's out of money scheme
Low light and
is
heavy duty are down.
it's always like it's a high concept. It's something that works, I think. So high concept, if you could infiltrate and cut the budget of the military, you know, and then make them less effective. But when you get to the minutia of it, it's always like, really? They would send them out in the field without a missile? Like, yeah, I don't know. But then in the real world, you hear about like us not being able to arm or to properly armor our soldiers that are literally in Afghanistan. It's like people have to donate money to armor them. So maybe it's not. Maybe that's not too far fetched.
Yep, the purse strings have to be cut at some point. Oh, this is what I was talking about with the Desert Scorpions having some kind of superhuman ability to kind of burrow into the sand, no hands, just like sink.
Yeah.
They can do a disappearing act. Yeah.
Well, do you think, is it because in this, are they trying to pretend like they're mirages? Or do you think they're, like, are they holograms?
I think, Joe, I mean, I got to save you from the wrath of the listenership. I think in this episode, they were playing those Cobra troops as robot simulators.
Yeah.
That's why they had that little box on their chest.
Right.
But they're actually real Cobras.
But they're real Cobras, yeah.
And as I say, like, I think the Desert Scorpions, at least in Deke continuity, have the ability to merge with the sand.
That's
like
crazy.
That. I don't know.
That's crazy.
It seems to exist within the physics of this episode.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He just referred to them as android guards. Yeah. He totally did.
Lowlight, I can't reach Captain Kremov. What's going on with you? Nothing good.
Oh, nice. Lowlight's secretly communicating using his visor.
Yeah.
Cool.
In front of two Cobra guards who don't notice anything.
Or just any Cobra guards, the Crimson Guard Immortals, the supposed elite of the elite.
Yeah, the elite of the elite, yet they can't hear or see anything. Although, you know what, here's the deal. This is all fun. Like these sand viper or sand scorpions. Well, here's his scorpion toy. This is cool because we get a scorpion sandstorm showdown. We're going to commercial. Be right back. Hey, listeners, I'm not sure if you've heard the news, but Joe and Joe has started a Patreon, and I'm inviting you along for the ride. Go to patreon.com/JoeandJoePod and check out my page. Right now, there are 2 opportunities for you to help support the show. You can choose to be a grunt or a viper. Grunts get access to all the Joe and Joe episodes and early access to new episodes as they're created. Vipers get all that and access to my all-new spin-off podcast, Joe and Joe Illustrated, where I will be breaking down every single issue of the G.I. Joe comic books page by page in the deepest dive you'll ever hear on G.I. Joe. So go to patreon.com/JoeandJoePod and see what's happening over at the Fort Wadsworth Motor Pool. We'll see you there. So that was like the ultimate play showdown where you got one guy with one action figure with a pet versus another action figure with a pet, and let's get it on, you know. Mm-hmm. That's quite exciting. Yeah, this one really is a showcase of all these toys. This is a solid episode.
if for no other reason but that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it definitely does show off all the capabilities and features of these toys.
Still in our blast 'em all.
Now,
Dig the version 2 sci-fi redesign. That was my sci-fi, and when I saw
that's
lime green sci-fi,
that's sci-fi.
yeah, in the backseat,
In the back seat,
Retaliator,
that's the new sci-fi. Oh, that's crazy.
Looks even nastier.
Yeah, actually, I like that better than the green one. The green one was like garish enough to be like someone looked at that and said, let's keep going this garish for the next rest of the line, and I was always like, no, go the other way. I do like that design. Oh, look at Dusty.
Nice.
Dusty's gonna save the scorpion.
But what do I do now?
Sandstorm's
humanitarian.
snout looks like a pig snout. Just to
Well, okay.
not let that go by. That looks like he's got the snout of a pig, which is really disturbing.
That showdown was handled rather anticlimactically, wouldn't you say, Joe?
Yeah, that could have been a better fight. That could have been reminiscent of the Spirit
Jump on,
Spirit Storm
Sandstorm.
Shadow
The
fight
only way
from
out
Satellite
is
Down.
If only.
Which was epic.
But don't worry,
Yeah.
we'll get
Well,
we'll get another crack at that. showdown.
Sandstorm holding on to Dusty's back as he climbs up the wall is fantastic. I wish
How exactly does
I
climb
wish
that
my
wall?
dogs would do that.
You need a coyote in your life.
Yeah,
a real
dogs don't
obedient.
have that kind of grip strength. Not at all. So, so Steve, if you could be a member of the Joe team or Cobra team, I'd like to ask my guest this: what member would you be? Would you be Joe or Cobra? And what was your specialty? And then we'll get a name from you.
I'd probably be a Joe. And just to troll the fans out there who aren't quite my vintage, I would call myself Action Feature.
Action Feature. Oh, that's great.
Because I would have all of them. Chopping action, a glider, a deployable parachute, color change, battle damage. Yeah, I came up in the era of Ninja Force, Eco Warriors. I wasn't interested in realistic-looking Green Army men. I was interested in the figures that squirted water. Okay.
So
that'd
what
be
would
me.
your
Action
official specialty be? Like what would we say? Like you would be like the like on you would be like jack of all trades.
Well, I'd probably be a sub-team specialist.
A sub-team special. Okay.
You need someone to head up your guys that are I don't know, planting the GI Joe flag on the moon. Well, Action Feature is your man.
Yeah, you're like the Joe team pinch hitter. You can literally do everything.
Yeah.
You can literally do everything. Your Action Feature.
That's a little OP, but I'll take it.
Well, you know,
Because
I
no
mean,
one else is going to take that.
I didn't say you do it well, but you know, I'm just saying it's the phrase jack of all trades, master of none, right? You know. So yeah,
I'll take it.
But like they need a guy to pinch hit, we need a guy to fly, we need a guy to drive, we need a guy to karate chop, we need a guy to squirt water out of his blaster. Someone give Action Feature a call. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
I liked it. I like it a lot. That's
Embarrassing.
fantastic, Steve.
Yes, isn't it delightful?
So this is the Zorana Big Ben romance that we're getting a little bit here, and it just makes me think that at one point Mainframe and Big Ben are going to be sitting down having lunch in the commissary, and Mainframe's going to be like,
How could I
"How
have
dare
been
you?
such a sap?
Like, how dare you? Like, she was mine. She was
because
like
of
bros
the
before
exotic-
hose, bros before hose,
The
dude.
exotic accent.
Yeah, that's the
I may have
appeal.
been a sap, but I still have the
Um,
explosive sap
I
as
love
well.
that his
Go for it, Big Ben.
prison
And
just
find
has a
Captain
big
Kremov.
hole to the outside. Even if he didn't have the explosive sap, there was still a big enough hole that he could look out and see the coyote.
Yep.
Yeah, and they didn't take the
Give him a
explosive
little
sap
rock
off
hammer.
him.
Big Ben
Here's Red Star just
Sandstorm.
chilling,
These stupid exercises
chilling
over
by.
again.
Oh, because he thinks they're still in an exercise.
Funny you should ask.
Chilling
Do you
by
think
the
the term
lakefront.
Red Star fell out of favor because, I mean, it was 1991 or thereabouts, and the Soviet Union was coming down.
Yeah, I don't know. They
so-
they don't call him that on the show, but that was his action figure name, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. His file name was Kremov, so they call him Captain Kremov in this episode.
Yeah. Well,
But-
I wonder. There's DC has a character named Red Star,
What a pity.
and
Oh, that's
I
a pity.
wonder if there was some
Have the general
copyright
that
thing
no
with
one
calling him
can.
that in an animation. Like maybe
Though,
maybe
if
DC had
memory
a
serves, I I think the comic book explained its way around it.
Oh, yeah?
Mr. Harmer is a genius of diplomacy.
he's the
I think he
best.
said, like 146. It was late in the run, and it was like one of the Star Brigade missions, and Red Star was leading the October Guard.
Uh-huh.
And I think he said, like, it was a throwaway line, but he said something like, "Yeah, I got my code name before it became politically embarrassing."
Oh, interesting.
Because I'm pretty sure the Soviet Union was taking off, or Russia was taking all the Red Stars off their military equipment.
Oh, yeah, they
at
were
that
for
point.
sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. It's funny. The last episode we did on this pod too, they also changed the name of Hector Ramirez.
Oh yeah.
The reporter. It was obviously supposed to be him, and even there was a shot of a newspaper with him, and it said byline by Hector Ramirez, but they called him Jose something, and I couldn't figure out why they would need to change it. I don't think it's some kind of weird copyright thing where they couldn't use his name or something. I don't know. But here we go. G.I. Joe team's back to full financing. And Sandstorm gets to eat sirloin steak every day. See, that seems like a waste of military resources. Okay, I'm going to go the other direction.
A waste of anyone's
now.
resources.
Yeah.
I don't eat that, bro.
Yeah. I'm going to go the other direction and say, hold on a second, guys. Just because we can fund your bullets and your missiles, that doesn't mean that your coyote gets to eat sirloin every night.
Oh, my.
That is highly extravagant.
I'm hungry, Joe.
I know. I want to eat some coyote now. Like wait, what? I'm
You want
sorry.
to eat
What?
some coyote?
What? That didn't come out right. What? No, I like this episode though. This is a good episode, right?
Agreed. It had action, but most importantly, it had toys.
23
23 minutes of pure commercial. And that's something that DIC did very well. I mean, they were probably mandated to do it by Hasbro.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, Sunbow Animation had all these fantastical extra designs for things that they needed, you know, suggested by the plot, like a Cobra airship or a Cobra base, things that weren't available. Whereas Deke, it seems very evident that the plot lines almost revolve around what toys were available.
Yeah.
The casts are very tight. I recall listening to your episode about what's it called? The episode where they're vacation. Volcania.
Yeah. Vacation at Volcania.
That's it. And saying how interestingly enough, none of the Joes seem to be wearing their vacation clothes. They're
Not
all
at
like
all.
fully uniformed.
Yeah. Put on some
For the
shorts, guys.
simple reason that, like, I guess DIC was mandated to not show the action figures in anything other than their action figure designs.
Yeah. Except at the end of that episode, except for once everything was wrapped up, they finally put everyone in uncomfortably revealing Speedos. Like,
man.
awkward Speedos. Well, listen,
Thank you for saving me from having to rewatch it.
yeah. Steve, this is great. It's Steve from GIJOBURG, guys. It's the podcast you need to seek out. Find them on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Go check out the GoFundMe. See if we can get these guys to JoeCon 2018 so we get some good in-depth podcast reporting. Steve, thank you so much for being on the show, man.
Joe, it's a dream come true, man. Thank you very much.
This was a real delight to speak out South Africa. Before we go, can I have you say diplomatic immunity for me?
Do you want a specific accent?
Oh, in your accent, in your South African
Like
accent.
a thick South African
Yeah,
accent?
like from Lethal Weapon.
Because I don't speak with a thick South African accent. I don't speak with the stereotypical Sharlto Copley. I don't know if you remember the guy.
I know who Sharlto Copley is. And I'm not so sure your assessment of your accent is spot on, but go ahead, give me some diplomatic immunity.
Diplomatic immunity.
Yeah, see, that's it. That's perfect. Thank you. You just...
Yeah. I Sharltoed that one.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, man. This has been a real delight. And now you, Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.